Live here, and then we're ready to rock and roll. What do you reckon? Good to go? Good to go. Hey, Mel, how are you, buddy? Love that I have your company here this morning. I reckon there might be a few little cheeky Australia Day hangovers creeping in this morning. So good. All right, let's get stuck into another episode of Q&A. So let's do it, guys. All right, first cab off the rank in terms of questions. What is better for fat loss? Low carb or low fat? Okay, we get this question a lot. So one of the things that you want to think about is if there's three macronutrients, right? Protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Once we've decided how many calories we want to be eating each day, which is determined by whether we want to gain weight or lose weight, the first thing that we do is we put in our protein amount. Okay, put in our protein amount. And then once we've got our protein amount, then we just fill up the rest of the calories with either carbohydrate or fat. So when someone asks what's better for body fat loss, is it to go low carb and higher levels of fat, which basically means you're eating not a lot of carbs, but you're eating perhaps more avocado, nuts, oils type style? Or are you better to go low fat, high carb, which is the exact opposite, allowing yourself more rice and pastas and these types of foods? So I believe that it's not necessary to choose between one or two, low carb or low fat. Reality is, if you have a weight loss goal, which is what most of us have here, how you lose body fat is not from eating low fat. How you lose body fat is from eating less calories than you need. Okay? So whether those calories come from carbs, whether they come from fat, or whether they actually are potentially overeating protein, it doesn't really matter. If we're talking about losing body weight on the scales over time, it is absolutely true that it doesn't matter where the calories come from. So I'm suggesting, personally, I like to take a slightly lower fat approach. And why do I prefer lower fat versus lower carb? Is because I want to have that energy in training. And if my carb goes too low, I start to feel really, really tired. For me, I don't get a whole lot of joy out of eating inch-thick avocado toast or handfuls of nuts. And although those foods are good for you, they are very high calorie. So you get to your calorie target quicker. Does that make sense? So if you're trying to choose between a low carb or a low fat day, you could decide to do it or approach, you could decide to do it like this. On the days that you're actually training, maybe in the gym, or you're doing a bit of extra exercise that day, you could go a little bit higher in carb that day and a little bit lower in fat. If you've got a day where you're more relaxing and you're just working the majority of the day, maybe you're still notching up your 10,000 steps, but not much more than that, you could opt to have a higher fat day. But at the end of the day, it's really not going to make that much of a difference because the calories are going to determine the result you get. This is a really, really good question, and hopefully that answers the question. Now, good morning, Mel. How are you, babe? And Shane's in the house as well. Hello, Jody. What's going on? Guys, if you have any questions, you can pop them into the comments and I will answer those questions. Good morning, Pascal, my little legend. Okay, can you explain the numbers around calories and weight gain you made in the post over the weekend? Yeah, so inside of our client group, I made a post in response to one of the girls saying that she gained, I think it was 2.7 kilos or 3.3 kilo. It might have been, let's just call it 3 kilos overnight, okay? And she was like, why did I gain 3 kilos overnight? Like I had a pretty intense day of eating. Did I actually gain 3 kilos of fat? So let me explain how that is close to impossible to gain 3 kilos of fat overnight. Okay. If you think about our calorie balance, let's keep it simple. What's coming in and what's going out. And there's either a surplus. In that case, you gain weight. If there is not enough, in that case, you lose weight. It really is coming down to that simple. So the question is, if you gained weight, how would you, so Mike Jane is saying water retention, stress, absolutely, that is part of it, Mike. So how could it be possible that let's rule out the possibility that this is fat first? Well, let me explain. You know that like fat glob that you've seen me holding before? I haven't got it here with me, but that's a chunk of fat, right? It's a big chunk of fat. So to put on a kilo of body fat, inside that kilo of body fat is 7,700 calories, okay? That means to store 3 kilos of body fat, you times 7,700 calories by 3, okay? So 3 times 700, we'll just call it 3 times 8,000 calories, 24,000 calories, okay? So you would have to, in order for you to gain 3 kilos of body fat overnight, you would have to have eaten 24,000 calories over your maintenance calories. Because remember, you only gain body fat if it is in surplus, okay? In surplus. So let's just keep this simple. If your maintenance calories is 2,000 calories or 3,000 calories, that means for you to gain 3 kilos of body fat overnight, you would have had to have eaten 26 to 27,000 calories overnight. Now, so whenever you see this surge in weight on the scales, you have to ask yourself, did I eat 25,000 calories overnight? And if the answer to that is no, it is not fat. So what's actually happening? As a couple of the guys and girls said, you are likely retaining body fluid. And what does that actually mean? If I took a loaf of bread, right, and dunked it in the water, in a sink of water, and then picked it up again, you know that loaf of bread would be 4 to 5 times heavier from the water that's now in the bread. Well, in the same way, when you have a high carbohydrate meal, particularly things like a big pasta night or a big pizza night that you might share with your family, which, yes, is higher calorie, but it's not 24,000 calories or 26,000 calories. When that carb comes into your belly and your muscle, it pulls with a lot of water. So you have a lot of water that's sitting there being stored with it. Now, if you think about that, we're talking about 5 to 7 times the weight. So that's a lot of extra water that's coming in, kind of like a dish sponge going through your belly, right? And so when that happens, your weight goes up and surges. So you haven't gained, and it will generally drop away within the next 24 to 48 hours, which is why if you're coming into this live and you've stepped on the scales this morning and you're like, oh my God, I put on a bunch of weight overnight. Yes, you put on weight, but you did not put on 2 kilos of fat overnight. Okay, let's make that very clear. Good morning, Chris O. I hope you're well, my brother. Okay, guys, any questions that you want to bang into the comments? So, Mel, I'm going to answer your question because this is a great question. How do you determine what our calorie intake should be to lose weight? Do you go off age and weight? Does height matter? This is a really, really good question, Mel. And I just want you to understand, Mel, that I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm a university qualified dietitian, and I have seen so many people, and I can tell you how to simplify this, okay? And you can do this for yourself, Mel. If you go and you type in calorie calculator, just into Google, okay? It'll ask you for a few numbers. It'll say, how old are you? What's your gender? What's your height? And what's your weight? Then it'll ask you what your activity level is. This is the part that most people think they're way more active than they actually are. So for me, I would consider myself sedentary. Why? Because I sit at a desk all day. I go to the gym, I do my 10,000 steps, but for the most part, I'm otherwise sitting at a desk. So I put myself in as sedentary. Based on these numbers, Mel, what will happen is for every girl in the world, it's going to come back as your maintenance calories are somewhere between 1,800 and 2,200. I'll say it again, 1,800 and 2,200. For men, it will come back with maintenance calories of 2,400 to 2,600. So to your question, Mel, why does gender matter? Gender matters because men have, generally speaking, a higher proportion of muscle mass, which needs to be accounted for because muscle demands more calories. So if you take your, let's call it 2,000 calorie maintenance, Mel, all we need to know, we do not need to get this like super granular 1,761.5 calories. We do not need to get that granular. All we need to do is take a slight amount off that and you will be in a deficit. So many people get like, oh, but can you tell me the exact? No, I can't tell you the exact amount because it's a guess anyway. So all we do is we take rough maintenance calorie figures, which again, the tools that you use to calculate calories, they are at best a maximum, an estimate anyway. Then we take an amount off that, which is an estimated amount anyway. And then we use MyFitnessPal, which is an estimate amount anyway, because you're probably not weighing every single thing. Also, MyFitnessPal is full of user entries, right? So anyone can jump on MyFitnessPal and put an entry on there. So the database is an estimation. So we've got lots of estimations in here. And so it makes zero sense to get your head in this knot of like trying to calculate individual when in the reality, yes, age does matter. Yes, weight does matter. Yes, height does matter. But you still do not need an individual calorie intake goal predicted off some equation that was developed 50 years ago, when the reality is you just need to be eating some amount less than what is considered your maintenance calories. And for every woman in the world, it will be somewhere around 1,900 to 2,100 calories. So as long as you're eating less than that, you will lose weight. Now, the question is, Mel, and this is where a lot of women go, well, how low do I go? And that's the problem. Yes, if you, let's say maintenance calories for women are 2,000, if you eat 1,000 calories, you will lose weight quicker than if you eat 1,500 calories, which is why everyone does it. This is the reason why everyone just cuts calories quicker. But let me ask you a question. What does that always lead to? When you cut calories quicker, what does it always lead to? You get really good progress quickly. And then what happens? You can't keep it up because you're so fatigued. You're so tired because you just cut your calories in half. So what we're trying to do is set you up at a moderate calorie deficit level of 300 to 500 calories less than your maintenance. That's it. No more. If you do more than this, the chances are you're going to hit the weekend or hit a stressful day at work and then just pile on the calories and binge back. Does this make sense, Mel? Let me know in the comments if that makes sense. Shane says, I see your post about do not work out 7 days per week. What do you recommend if the workout routine is built into your daily routine? If you skip it, you're off for the day. Any recommendations? Shane, that's a really, really good question, man. And I feel you. And the reason I feel you is because we want to, like, part of it is not just the physical health, it's the mental health, right? So intertwining fitness into our day, I don't know about you, but it sets the scene for the day, right? Yeah, exactly, Mel, right? This is the point. And so you're on this yo-yo all the time. So back to Shane. Yes, I agree that for a lot of people, working out 6 to 7 days actually helps their structure. That doesn't mean that it helps your results. They're two totally different things. Does it help my mindset? Yes. If I train every day, it helps my mindset 100%. Why? Because it sets the tone. I get in the gym, I block everything out. I feel like I'm determined, I'm focused. Yes. But training for an hour a day, smashing yourself, that doesn't do anyone any benefit, especially when you start to get over the age of 40 and 50, Shano. So what you want to do is, if you do want to train every single day and you want to keep that into your routine so you don't feel off for the day, which is why this is such a great question, you just need to significantly reduce the volume, Shane. Okay. So how would you go and do that? You could do one upper body exercise, one lower body exercise, done. Make sense? In other words, a 15 to 20 minute workout every day is completely fine, because you're not accumulating all of this extra volume and damage and then putting damage on top of damage on top of damage and never actually building any muscle and recovering. Does that make sense, man? That was a really, really good question, by the way. Guys, if you do have any questions, bang them into the comments. And like I said, I will answer as many questions as we've got coming out. Okay, so I'm going to go into Kylie's question. Jace, your podcast last night about exercise was very timely. I'm on the beginner gym program, 3 days a week, a push-pull leg split, and I'm starting week 7 of 8 weeks. I have 10 reps on the program and rotating, increasing reps, and then upping the weight and going back to 10. Perfect. Do I get a new program at the end of week 8, or do I keep doing it? Is it exactly the same exercises? 2%? No, this is a great question. Okay. So what Kylie is asking is, after you've had a block of a program, should you change the exercises? Should you ask for a new program, or should you do the same program again? What do you think? This is an excellent question, Kylie. And actually, Susan and I discussed this yesterday. So here's what I would suggest. Most people change their programming too quick, right? And let me explain why. Let's just pretend, Kylie, that you've been practicing really hard to get good at a squat. Like, I was shit at squatting for 15 years. And now I'm pretty good and still learning. But what most people do is they change from program to program to program to program to program to program, different program, I just done that program, did this program. And what they're failing to realize is that, just like getting good at sports, the way that you get good and confident and stronger in the gym is to practice the skill, right? So for me, in answering your question, it is a question between what I think is best and what keeps you interested. Okay. So for me, I'll just let you know, I train the same program for 6 months to a year personally. Why? Because I don't need my training to be novel. I'm not scrolling TikTok or Instagram thinking, oh man, I just saw this influencer do this like cool shit. There are core movements that are going to help you. Okay. There are core movements that if you just do them over and over again, and these are going to be movements like doing a squat, and if you can't do a squat, doing, say, a leg press, right? These are going to be doing a chest press, and if you can't do that, a chest press machine. These are going to be doing a chin up, and if you can't do that, do a pull down. So we can vary the skill level, but you got to keep rolling over the same core movements if you want to see progress. If you just change constantly programs, you will never progress, because what you're chasing is not the stimulus and the resistance. You're chasing almost like novelty. And to be fair, I had a question on our list today, which was, can I just eat the same foods over and over and over again, or do I have to have variety? Well, it's the same in that, Kyles. It's like, I eat the same foods every single day. I'm a little bit off at the moment because we're away from a fixed place, but I eat the same foods every day. Why? Because there's a core set of foods that work. They work for maintaining weight. They work for building muscle. Those core set of foods, I'll tell you what they are. They are meat, fish, chicken. Meat, fish, chicken of any variety, okay? Fruit, vegetables, eggs, meat, fish, chicken, fruit, vegetable, eggs, low-fat dairy, and unprocessed carbohydrates. What I mean by that is, or plain carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates like rice and pasta. If you're eating those 8 foods over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you will not have a weight loss problem. You will just flat out not have a problem. What most people do is they eat those 60 to 70% of the time, and everything else goes on top of that, which is the pizzas and the carbonara sauces and the 2 bottles of wine, and that's where they blow their calories and they put on weight. So coming back to your question, Kylie, when should you change programs? Okay, you should change programs when you feel like mentally I need re-stimulating, because realistically, at the end of the day, if you're not doing the program, then you're not going to get the results, right? So when you feel like you maybe need some mental re-stimulation. Secondly, when you feel like you're really starting to nail the exercises in there and you want to have more challenging exercises put into your next program, right? So for example, you're finding it really easy to do supported chin-ups. So now you want to move to doing a full chin-up, and that might be a while away, but just the point stands, right? So hopefully that answers your question. That said, you're the client, right? You will come to your coaches and you'll say, hey, getting to the end of my 8-week block, I'm interested in getting a new program. And if you're talking directly to me and asking my advice, my suggestion would be, unless it was a very beginner program that we built you and you need advancements in the movement, that you rerun programs at least 2 or 3 times. But again, a lot of people might be like, well, but I get bored doing things. Well, that's the problem. That's why you're not making change, because boredom has nothing to do with results. Unfortunately, getting results in health and fitness, on the front end, it looks all, unicorns and rainbows from these fitness influencers. But on the back end, it's people doing the same things over and 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 over again. Does this make sense, guys? Okay, thanks. Love boring. Yeah, exactly. Guys, if you have any questions you want to ask, pop them in the comments so that I can answer those questions. Mel says, makes sense. Thank you. Yep, no problems at all. Shana, got your brother. All right, so let's kick on. Why do I always feel hungrier when I'm tired? Well, because when you're tired, well, there's 2 things that are going on. Your body is releasing hormones that are associated with you being fatigued. You probably have heard of things like cortisol. Well, most hormones that we release, they don't have one role in the body. They have multiple roles in the body. Hormones like cortisol are released when you're stressed, but that also triggers hunger. So stress and hunger tend to go together. So when you're hungry, underslept, and tired, so go back to Mel's point before, you're on this like over stringent calorie deficit, you are starving yourself basically, you're tired, you're stressed, and then you're smashing yourself in the gym, you are indeed a cortisol ravaged individual, and that's driving you to want to eat more. Now, plus the fact that you're actually running out of petrol, so you're actually hungry all the time. This is the reason why massive calorie deficits, they can work for a short period of time, but if you don't have an exit strategy, you're in trouble straight away. Should I be avoiding sugar completely if I want to lose weight? This is a great question. Should I be avoiding sugar completely if I want to lose weight? Remember what we said at the start of this Q&A episode is that sugar, if you take some rice and it breaks down in your belly, it breaks down into sugar as well. That's what all carbohydrates break down into. So whether you have that sugar in a refined manner, or you're like as in table sugar, or you're having that sugar coming from carbohydrates, it's still breaking down into sugar, albeit a little bit quicker from the refined version. Should you be avoiding it? I wouldn't be like, just like I wouldn't suggest putting sugar into your teas, for example, and your coffees, when you could just have stevia or monk sugar, which contains no calories. At the end of the day, I think this demonization of sugar is a little bit unnecessary. What it is that if you've got a weight problem, you're just having lots of calories and they happen to come from sugar. But if you had a weight problem and you didn't eat any sugar, but you ate lots of fat, as in, for example, lots of takeaway, or you ate really, really healthy and you had lots of oil, you would still gain weight. So it's not fair to demonize the sugar when actually, for a weight issue, the issue is the excess of calories. It's not specifically the sugar. It might be coming from the sugar, but you can have some sugar in your diet. It's not the biggest deal. One thing that you might find about having a lot of sugar in your diet is you might find that it triggers hunger in you. So one of the girls the other day mentioned when she has a protein bar, she actually finds it triggers her hunger. And that's a really good insight that she's made. So she avoids protein bars because the sweetness triggers her hunger. That's probably more psychological, but if you've noticed that when you have a Tim Tam, you've got to eat the entire packet of Tim Tams, well, absolutely. That's what's going on. It's triggering, right? So avoiding sugar at all costs, I don't think is necessary. But if you know that you're a sweet tooth and you constantly just get triggered to overeat when you eat a biscuit or something sweet, then that's when you avoid it. A good old night shift, Craig says, constant battle on what to eat. I mean, Craig, look, I'm just going to say this straight up. Anyone, and shout out to all the girls and guys that do either night shift or long shifts underground in coal mines. And man, I've seen what it's like for you guys. You guys have got it difficult. And what tends to be the pattern with people that work shifts is they get paid pretty well because of the shifts, but they're just crazy. They're just battling fatigue constantly. And when you're battling fatigue, what happens is your willpower is really, really low. And when your willpower is really low, you just like your defenses when you're tired against, fuck, I'm just going to get something really, really simple and go and eat everything in your fridge. It's pretty hard, right? So shout out to all of the girls and guys that do, that do any type of shift work, even something like nursing. It's just really difficult. Going back to the program question, Vicky says, I did the same program for 10 months. Okay, and now Vicky is getting in advancements in her program, but after she's mastered the basics, right? And that's it. That's why Vicky's progressing. That's why Vicky's body is completely changed, because she was willing to do the boring stuff. Hey, Jace. Hey, Hells. How are you, babe? Okay, guys. Any more questions that you want to hit with me in the comments? We've got a couple more and we'll wind this up. Is 10,000 steps actually necessary if I prefer to ride my bike? That's a really good question. And people gravitate towards the 10,000 steps thing and they make it almost like this fixed rule. The reality is, like, when we're trying to suggest 10,000 steps, let's go back a bit, right? Why do we actually suggest 10,000 steps? Like, why is that? It's because the vast majority of the world don't go for a daily ride on their bike. The vast majority of the world don't work on their feet anymore. They work sitting at a desk like I do. The vast majority of the world, if they don't have a target to aim for by getting up and doing it, they end up, what? Doing 2,000, 3,000 steps a day? Because that's the nature of how our lives are set up now. So, is 10,000 steps necessary? If you're going out and you're smashing some cardio in the morning and doing a bunch of riding, then no, you could make a complete argument that actually you're just going to burn far more calories doing that than you are 10,000 steps. What about Should you then do bunches of extra cardio? Well, you can, but for a lot of people, what I see is that when you do bunches of extra cardio and you have a weight loss goal, it makes you more tired, which means you might just exert yourself for half an hour to an hour doing the cardio, but then when you stop, you're extra tired. So your movement for the rest of the day slows down. So it actually balances each other out. And this is well known in weight loss literature, is that people that do lots of cardio tend to be more tired the rest of the day and more hungry the rest of the day. So they actually oftentimes end up putting on weight, which is ironic because they're burning more calories, but they actually put on weight. And that's because you're more tired and more hungry. Going back to the question, is 10,000 steps necessary? It's not necessary if you've got an otherwise active life. But if you don't have an active life and you sit at a desk all day, it's a target. There's nothing magical that happens when you hit 10,000 steps, but it's a very good target. And as a minimum, if you can split those 10,000 steps over the course of a day, it's very, very helpful for a number of things. Firstly, your mental well-being. Have you ever just been sitting at your desk and oh my God, this is just not working? This happens to me all the time. But then get up, go for a walk, maybe get a coffee as you're walking and just go outside for a little bit. And what happens? You come back a little bit fresh. You don't have to do the 10,000 steps in one go. You do 2,000 or 3,000 steps, come back to work and bang, right? How good is that? All right, so final question. How long does it actually take to see results in the mirror? Cool, good question. How long does it actually take to see results in the mirror? So if I'm to answer the question just straight up, I would say 3 to 4 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks. You will start to see shifts in your body composition, which is why taking photos is really, really important. But you're not going to see this overnight six-pack abs in 3 to 4 weeks, nor should you want to, because whatever you do to lose the weight, you generally got to keep doing it to keep it off. So if you hurry the process, generally speaking, it means that you need to try to stick to doing that, and it's just not going to work. How can you reframe being patient? You know what? I have seen results that just blow my mind from people over 4 to 6 months. They just look like a completely different person. And if they had a lot of weight to lose at the start, especially so. But even someone who's only got 5 or 6 kilos to lose, over a 4 to 6 month period, you will see improvements in your muscle. You will definitely see improvements in your strength. Your overall body composition and tone will look completely different. It would be reasonable to assume that you could lose somewhere between 5 and 15 kilos in that period of time. So you can absolutely make a dent. And for a lot of people, they've just lost so much hope that they can actually be healthy again. And when they start to, I think the target is the numbers. If you can start to lose the first 5 kilos, right? That's when you start to be like, oh, this is working. Now I feel encouraged. So I do like the idea of some early weight loss to try to help you prove to yourself that you don't need to starve yourself in order to get it. We've got a question. Can you live in calorie deficit mode forever? That's a good question. The technical answer to it is no. And the reasoning for that, Mum, is that if you were to live in calorie, the point of calorie deficit is that you are eating less energy than you are burning up. So if you are indeed, it doesn't matter what you think you're doing, if you are indeed in a calorie deficit, you are losing weight because you're taking in less energy than you're burning. So that would mean that if you're constantly taking, eventually you're going to get to a point where you don't weigh anything anymore. Like that, do you know what I mean? Because it's called the law of energy dynamics or thermodynamics, that basically says if you are in a deficit, you will lose weight. If you are losing weight, you are in a deficit. So you just can't go and stay in there forever, because you would eventually die if that was true, right? But the reality is, the question you're probably more so asking, is it beneficial to stay in a deficit for permanent? No, it's not. Because, and this is where a lot of people try to live their lives, it's like, you're just going to be so fatigued, your life is going to suck, you're going to be constantly hungry. This is where, like, I think the image of people having six-pack abs all year round, it's a bit of a missell, because if you were to look like that all year round, the reality is you're going to be constantly hungry. The brain is going to gnaw on you to try to eat, because it doesn't like being that low in body fat. Does that make sense? Ems is asking, what about keto diet? What specifically about it, Ems? Are you asking me, is it good? Well, we had a question earlier on today, which was, what's better, low fat or low carb? Me personally, I would prefer to go lower in fat, but in a keto diet is higher in fat. I don't like those foods enough to not have carbohydrates. Can it work? Yes, it can work. How? Guys, like, this is what we need to understand. It's not the special diet that is working. That, like, every diet only works if it creates a calorie deficit. Okay? If it creates a calorie deficit. So the way that keto creates a calorie deficit is because most people go from eating processed shitty food, and when you start eating avocado and oil and you think that, oh, now I'm eating healthy, so you don't eat pizza, right? You cut out pizza. So what's actually going on here? Why does keto work in the short term? It works because you're cutting out a full section of highly shit food, which is over-processed carbohydrate food, right? Not good carbohydrate food, over-processed carbohydrate food. So it works until you decide, oh man, I miss having a pizza occasionally. Oh, I miss having some pasta. I miss eating potatoes. Then what do? So could you do a keto period? Yeah, you can do a keto period, sure. But all you're doing, the reason it's working is because it's helping you adhere to your calorie deficit. Now, there are many ways to do that. You can adhere to your calorie deficit by cutting out all fluids that contain calories. You can eat all whole foods. You could do carnivore. You could do vegetarian, the worst diet of all. You could do man shake. You could do any of these things, and they will work for the short term because you eat less calories. That's simple. Morning, Nick. How are you, babe? Morning, Kerry. Okay, Seth says, I can't even eat. Not hungry and less depressed. Sleep is poor. Still a biggie. I have PCOS and GERD. Worse luck and old now. Yeah, man. Like, that sounds like a challenging position to be in. And when you start to get these kind of cycles where each thing creates the next thing. So, for example, you have reflux like you do, and then this causes digestive issues. The digestive issues causes you not to want to eat until you then binge, then you feel like shit, then you gain weight, then you're depressed, and you've also got PCOS, and now you're hungry. You're never hungry because your gut is inflamed, so when you're in that circumstance, Seth, I think the situation is like, you kind of got to stop consuming all of this fitness media about what it should look like for you, and instead just step back and ask yourself, like, how do I deal with the root cause here? How do I deal with the root cause? The PCOS, the reflux. How do I deal with that? And then the symptoms like depression, poor sleep, hunger mismanagement, they will start to improve once you've dealt with the root cause. But you can't deal with the whole thing all at once and expect that you're going to see massive change. Does that make sense? Carl's, I've been listening to a lot of older podcasts talking about Mastermind program. Is that still part of BBA? Not at the moment, Carl's. Not at the moment is the short answer. So basically we did a it was a 12-week mastermind program, and just trying to get the balance right. What we found is it was the way we used to do it, Coles. It was like quite like heavy delivery for a short period of time. And the girls and the guys that were part of it separate absolutely loved it. But then without the long-term follow-up, the old behavior starts to come back in, right? So then what we did is we did a bit of a trial of a 12-month version of that. And what we found is that so many mums and dads just get so busy that they find it hard then to make a constant mental commitment to things like their goals and their identity and these things. So it almost like, I love delivering those that's my favorite shit, to be honest. And some of our best ever clients like Terry and Nick and Xanth are all products of that mastermind program. They've adhered those behaviors long term. They've learned to think differently. But it is a challenging thing, and it takes a lot of emotion to run. I would like to bring it back, Coles. Straight up, I would like to bring it back in a shorter form, because it's extremely bonding as well. But it needs to be brought back at the right time. And there are a couple of things that I still want to get right in our base program before we do that. Does that make sense? Hello, Aiden. How are you, brother? Good morning, mate. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to love you and leave you there. Hopefully that was helpful. As always, if you've got any questions, you can bang them through to the coaching inbox, and myself or one of the other coaches will answer those questions. Other than that, I'll see you on the coaching calls this week, guys. Make sure you're part of them. And if you're watching on IG, appreciate you.